Theater of Protest objects to dominant culture's control and demands that the minority culture's voice and political agenda is heard. Aristophanes' comedy, the Lysistrata, which was written in 411 BC, is often called the first anti-war play. And I'm going to give you, this is pretty funny. It's basically about the men trying to control the women, and the men have boners, and so the women withheld sex, and then they control everything because of it. Here's going to be a fun.
To put an end to the Peloponnesian War, Lysistrata persuades women from all over Greece to go on a sex strike until the men agree to make peace. Lysistrata hatches a plan with the older women to seize control of the Acropolis, where the city treasury is kept. The men attempt to smoke the women out of the Acropolis, but the women extinguish the fires and triumphantly drench the men. When a magistrate, Aproboulos, arrives to retrieve funds for the war, Lysistrata berates him about the losses that the women have been forced to bear. Women have to take on more than twice your burden. Firstly, it's us giving birth to children, then we send them off as soldiers. The women dress the magistrate up in their clothes and send him away humiliated. As the strike continues, the sex-starved men of Greece become increasingly desperate. A Spartan herald approaches the Acropolis and finds the magistrate outside. He explains the desperate situation of his countrymen, and they both agree that a treaty is required. Delegations from Athens and Sparta meet to discuss the treaty. Lysistrata appears with her naked handmaid, Peace. The men's eyes are fixated on Peace as Lysistrata chastises them for treating each other so badly and reminds them that they previously helped one another. The Spartan and Athenian leaders guiltily agree and decide on land rights to end the war. Lysistrata gives the women back to their men and joins the celebration of peace.
2,400 years later, in the 1960s and 1970s, similar anti-war plays were produced as students protested the Vietnam War. Moving on from anti-war, one such theater that represents theater of protest is El Teatro Campesino, or the Farm Workers Theater, founded in 1965 by Luis Valdez. Spanish-speaking theater has existed in America since the late 16th century, but this theater did more than celebrate Latino culture. It protested social injustice. Valdez and his theater improvised plays to support Filipino and Chicano migrant farm workers led by Cesar Chavez, who were on strike against the California grape growers. Performed on backs of flatbed trucks, again, theater is everywhere, these plays were often cast with striking workers, which narrowed the line between performer and audience, which made the audience participation critical. Valdez has written that the purpose of his theater is to replace the lingering negative stereotypes of the Mexican in the U.S. with a new positive image created through Chicano art, and to continue to dramatize social despair of Chicanos living in an Anglo-dominated society. His most famous play is Zoot Suit, which is based on the Sleepy Lagoon murder trial and the famous Zoot Suit riots. This play ran for 11 months in LA. It was also the first Chicano play to be produced on Broadway, and Valdez was the first Mexican-American to direct on Broadway. And I'm not sure how many of you know about what the Zoot Suit riots were. Maybe give it a quick read if you're interested. But back in World War II, everybody was like, they were rationing fabrics for the war and food and everything, and like everybody was on edge because, you know, we were in war. And in LA, at the time, a popular diet were those Zoot Suits. And in LA, there were some servicemen who were on duty and off duty, and they were hanging out and based in LA, in the San Diego area, and they would see these other people wearing the zoot suits and they would be upset. And then so it was basically like warfare between those in the military and those and not wearing these suits. And they saw it as a sign of disrespect that they weren't doing their part for the war, even though I'm sure they were. And so there was like an all-out brawl between them.
Now, a landmark play about the struggles of Mexican Americans gets an acclaimed revival, one that speaks to the times we live in. Jeffrey Brown has the story from Los Angeles.
It's a deeply American story, a Mexican-American story. Zoot Suit the play, set in Los Angeles in the 1940s amid rampant discrimination, a real-life murder trial, and the so-called Zoot Suit riots.
The grand jury has indicted you all on the same identical crime, not just you four, the whole so-called 38th Street gang.
And Zoot Suit, the cultural phenomenon, reaching from its premiere in 1978 at LA's Mark Taper Forum to Broadway to a 1981 film, and now, 38 years later, to a revival at the theater where it began.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, yeah. Let's try that. Let's see what happens.
Its writer and director then and now is Luis Valdez.
I believe in entertainment. I love entertainment, you know, but I love it with a purpose. I want people to come out of here thinking about what they saw and perhaps reassessing what's happening in their own lives with their families. And more than anything, I hope that people leave here with hope and inspiration.
Luis Valdez.
Valdez received a National Medal of the Arts from President Obama in 2015 for, quote, illuminating the human spirit in the face of social injustice. He spent his early years in a family of migrant workers.
Is it correct what I read, that you were 6 when you first discovered the love
hooked.
of theater in a camp?
In a camp, labor camp, I got hooked, yeah. I auditioned and I won my first role. Unfortunately, the week of the show, we were evicted from the labor camp where we were staying, and I was never in the play. So that left a big gap, a big hole in my chest.
That's an early lesson in theater and in politics, right?
Exactly. Well, exactly. The desire to do theater and anger, residual anger, because we had been evicted.
Yeah.
So 20 years later, roughly, I went to Cesar Chavez and pitched him an idea of a theater of, by, and for farm workers.
That was the beginning of El Teatro Campesino, a bilingual theater group of farm workers who perform short plays for other migrants, often on flatbed trucks in the middle of California fields. Valdez continued to write and produce larger works as well, becoming known as the godfather of Chicano theater. In 1977, he was asked to create a new production for the Mark Taper Forum. He chose the story of Pachuco culture, Mexican-American urban street life, and a sensational murder trial from the 1940s in which more than a dozen Chicano gang youth were convicted, followed by riots. Valdez used actual transcripts and news headlines from the era. The original production helped launch the career of many Chicano actors, including Edward James Olmos. Luis's brother Daniel Valdez and Rose Portillo were also part of the original cast, playing the young lovers at the heart of the drama.
It was ahead of its time. Very few Chicanos were really in the acting business. So for us, as a young cast that was coming together, we were people out off the street, making our first mark on the industry. But seeing the reactions of the audience and seeing what the audience responded to, because Zoot Suit is much more than a play, it's an event. In many ways, it was a spiritual experience in that sense.
It was also putting people on the stage and story on the stage that most audiences hadn't seen.
Exactly.
They hadn't seen characters like this. They'd not seen Hispanic, Latino, Chicano, whatever you want to call us, Mexican Americans on the stage. And it was a moment where several things were going on. One is you don't always know what you're missing until you see it. So to suddenly see this play and this stage filled with people that look like us was, oh my God, I didn't realize I was missing that. And so that sense of pride and I belong here too.
All you men are all alike, from such a stick, such a splinter.
All these years later, they still belong, this time playing the parents of the young protagonist, Henry Reyna. I asked how it felt to return.
When I walked into the audition room, and it was the same room that I walked into 38 years ago, and this person was also at the other end of the table, and Luis was on the other end of the table. And
Looking just the same as all those years ago.
Exactly the same. We had not changed at all. And I just took a breath and I put my bag down and I went, a moment, please. This is so surreal.
Yeah, I would say it's Groundhog Day.
Happy opening day, Bobby.
Now a new generation of younger Latino actors has taken the stage, joined by one of Mexico's leading film and TV stars, Demian Bichir, who fell in love with the Zoot Suit story as a teenager.
I wanted to be in it. It was my idea, and I pursued it.
Yeah.
Like
you
that.
heard about it and you said, I have to do this?
That is pretty much the way it happened.
Yeah.
Bichir plays what would become the most iconic role in Zoot Suit, El Pachuco, a kind of trickster spirit figure who hovers around and over the action, connecting the streets of 1940s Los Angeles to a mythological and spiritual past.
He is the story of us. He is every Mexican from the beginning of times up until now. He's a devilish presence. He's an angel. He's your best advisor, your best friend, and your worst enemy.
Taking on the role, says Bichir, was irresistible. But like others we spoke to, he had another reason he wanted to take part in the new Zoot Suit, for moments like this one, from a defense lawyer in the 1940s trial.
I've tried to defend what is most precious to our American society, a society that is now at war against the forces of racial intolerance.
A big part of me making that decision was how important this play is for the times we live in. This is a classic. This is a masterpiece of American playwriting. It's about discrimination, and it's about we Mexicans being a target for so many years.
Zoot Suit plays through March 26th. From the Mark Taper Forum in Los Angeles, I'm Jeffrey Brown for the PBS NewsHour.